Casey spelled that.
Sorry, yeah, I'll just do this. What does it look like?
So we've got,
Yeah,
let's see.
that's fine. Okay. We're good to go.
All right, Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to Carterton District Council's ordinary meeting. I'd just like to start by acknowledging our two new representatives from Rururangi, Auntie Miggy and Veronica Video. Welcome. And also acknowledge all those of you that are in public gallery, whether it's here in presence or virtually, and those in the media gallery who are not here but obviously joining us virtually. So welcome. So I would like to ask now if Tarangi Kawhitia, if you'd like to open with the Karakia Ki Mātanga.
Tēnā tātou. Nau I te awa tonga raro ki te awa raki, tēnei tā hāpori awhi ai e taratahi. Whano, haramai tutuki, haumi, hui tāhi.
Sure. So I forgot to mention, welcome to Councillors Stockley and Keys who are joining us virtually today. Do we have any apologies? No apologies. Conflicts of interest?
Yes, I have a conflict of interest on item 6.7, the wastewater stage 3 contract.
Thank you. Public forum? We don't have any. Oh, right.
We should probably just go. Have a seat there, right? Place. Do you stand? Sure, okay. I just previously want to welcome you to COVID into whatever stage level 2. But more importantly, I'd like to thank you for your continued support in terms of having our component, tangata whenua component in the welcoming of new citizens and the support that there is for the schools too, that we have relationships with and grateful for that. I also want to thank you for the highlighting, the tour or journey that we went on, and I'd like to acknowledge the good turnout that was there, and we filled up the 22 centre for the easily, so grateful for that. The piece that I've come to see council about, and just to think about how we might do this running into the future, has a little bit to do with the highlighting, but it's more a high-level principle. So sometimes Māori engagement with councils is dependent on personalities, and the personalities then are able to bring things along. And so that might be how our relationship might have reignited under Ron, Mark, in terms of that area. And the thing that we need though is to, rather than rely on relationships, put things into policy and think about how each of those policies that might come forward have a Māori component. And what they sometimes it's rather than what's in complying with the regulation, how we want to go forward and as an opportunity. And so one of those that I want to bring up more with the Wellington Regional Growth Framework is we were able to get on there because of the teaming with Greater Wellington, and they set up just a little blue sticker by Carterton, and that blue sticker was about Papakainga. And so there was a Papakainga expression in Masterton and in Carterton, and it's around where our Papakainga is. And so we're able to get that onto the table. Then there's, in terms of urban growth, we've also got the Carterton East, for one of a better term, and that's a greenfields opportunity. Most of the Papakainga are greenfields opportunities as well. So in terms of how you might respond as a council to that, because it's still in development stages, we would love to think about how the Papakainga is written into that, because as we think about any opportunities for expansion at the Papakainga, so our current infrastructure can take more than the houses that are there, and we have outlined upcoming stages to the Marae Bill, but then there's opportunities outside of it. And so we note that Trust House has a new Māori CEO, and so might be a little more open to the Māori worldview. We also note the lack of social housing in Mairapa, and the ability for Māori to maybe lead some. And so social housing was a part, and not to take it away from Carterton East in terms of the green space, but if it was a combination, for example, Papakainga thinking the green fields, and we were making approaches nationally, there might be something that we could do together. So if there are funding and funds in terms of Tupuni Kokiri and Papakainga housing, then I think if we made a joint approach, then we can have social housing and Papakainga housing here in the Carterton area. And so one of the things is just at the moment there's a strategy about how to do that. Next stages might be about policy. And so this is not to undermine our relationship agreement that's going to come on the 28th of October. It's how to support perhaps a relationship agreement paper with the workings within council for the betterment of all of our people. So we're just saying, well, sometimes here we can lead some of that, and rather than leading it alone, working with our district council as we have been doing, but thinking about how we might do that, and things like there's other things like property policy. We might think about whether you want to strategically buy property over the long term. And so while that might not be in the Papakainga, it might be thinking about how Papakainga can contribute in the green fields. And so there's a bit more thinking. So the higher kind of thinking is that we think about in policy how might there be an opportunity to work with them, and then in the more concrete places there are some opportunities that lend themselves to iwi perhaps leading but alongside council. So Your Worship, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak in public. I'm grateful for our representatives here, Kaipiri and Timi, and the work that they've done, obviously in the new citizens, but in preparing for this and as a part of our our annual general meeting as well, and reflecting back. I'd also like to thank Councillor Stockley and your worship for being here attending on the AGM. I did recognise that it was your wedding anniversary, and I hope that you didn't get in trouble for that. And I did recognise that it was Rob's birthday. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ra. We really treasure the relationship, and it's something we're working on the whole time. And if our district is to go forward, that partnership just going to get stronger and stronger, and we need to consider everything as we go forward. But councillors, have you got any questions for Ra or any comment?
I'd just like to say, Ra, thank you so much for our journey the other week. That blew me away, and it's very, very dear. So thank you so much for your timing of the stories.
Appreciate it.
Oh, just with my policy portfolio hat on, it'd be great to catch up and talk a little bit more about what that might look like, about putting those values into our policies.
Well, thank you. It's great to be at the table, and thank you for what you've been doing.
Thanks. Thank you.
So now we move on to confirmation of the minutes. So we've got the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 24th of June. They're on pages 7 to 16. I'll take them all. Everyone's read them. Is there any comment? Can I have a mover there, please, to accept the minutes? Councillor Steve Bradley, and seconded by Robin Cherry Campbell. So all those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. So then we move on to the minutes of the wastewater treatment plant tenders committee held on the 8th of July on pages 18 and 19, and these are the public portion of that. Is there any comment on those? Can I have a mover, please? Is there a true and accurate record?
I'll move from Greg.
Thank you, Russell. Moved by Russell and seconded by Steve. All those in favour? Aye. Carried, thank you. So we do have more minutes to confirm, and just with the way the agenda's been set up, the public excluded portion of those minutes is not in that part of the agenda, but I'll just hand it over to our Chief Executive, Jane, to explain, bring it forward.
So these minutes we are bringing into the public. So there's, whenever we have a public excluded meeting, obviously that's in public excluded. We have resolved to go into public excluded. The minutes normally stay public excluded, except we always look at them to check that they still need to be in public excluded. We've made the call that these ones don't need to be in public excluded anymore, so they can come out of public excluded. Unfortunately, just the way that we're still teething through our new agenda process and the program that we've got, the IT program that we've got to generate our agendas, that's unfortunately fallen into the public excluded section. Anyway, long story short, you bring these forward and not treat them as public excluded for the purpose of adoption. Yep. Yeah. Oh no, you don't need to move them to that because they're not meant to be down the back. So we're amending that in your agenda, and you just treat them as if they're not in public excluded. Messy.
So we've all had a look at them. Can I have a mover, please? Yep. Stephen and seconder. Jill. Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jane, for explaining that. And we've got a report on the shift activities, and I'd like to invite Ellie, Todd and Kate Naitawa to talk to the report, please.
Just me.
Just you. Grab a seat and welcome.
That's it. Oh, shoot, good one. Cool. Do you want me to read through?
You can assume that we'll read.
Oh, okay.
So, anything else that you want to talk about, and then he'll ask you.
So I don't know if you know about Shift, but we are a foundation where all three councils in Wairarapa support our work. There's only 2 coordinators. We have to go for Becca and here. Yeah, we obviously COVID happened, so our Carterton numbers are down, but starting next week we're with Turanui and Waikato. So you can see the Carterton numbers, right?
It was a great report, and looks like you've any questions, guys, or comment? Rebecca?
Oh, just a comment, obviously very biased, but just great to see all the work you're doing and how you guys are going from strength to strength. I actually think that your breakdown in ages and living location is awesome. It's great. It shows you've got like a good spread of young women. So yeah, keep up the good work.
It was really, really interesting to read. A lot of it didn't know.
Yeah.
So it's awesome that we have. It's great.
Kia ora. I'm biased again too. I'm just focusing on the focus on young Māori aged 15 to 18. I know that target group can be quite challenging and sort of apathetic to participation actively in initiatives like this. And so what's the uptake like in terms of participation?
So we do have a new specific program called Te Tauranga, which Kata runs. So at the moment she's with the kura, and once she's back, because she's unfortunately had a few deaths in the family. So starting next week, she'll be reaching out to the Kapahaka group to see where that goes. So for that group and that program in particular, she has the PO, and then from the PO puts a movement with it. But then I'm finding with the young women that just come with just shift it, shift your mind. Once you feel like you've made that group feel like they're part of a safe environment, you see all different strengths coming out. Yeah, it's really nice to see.
I just have one further question, and it can be specific, but it's also generic to all the young women that you're working with. And it sort of centres around the type of wraparound support that you offer, that manaki you call them. And it's always been a challenge for anyone trying to do good in this space.
Yeah.
Can you just briefly give us a snapshot of what that might look like in terms of the wraparound support that you utilise?
In terms of?
I mean, there's them working individually with them, but then there's
once we leave them.
Yeah.
So with Just Shift It, when we go take them to, like, say I take them to the boxing academy, we make the connection, and if they actually enjoy it, we've had 3 young women from the kura join up now. So we're trying to make connections where they find where they might actually enjoy a sport or, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Hey, thank you for that report. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's awesome, and it's great you come along to talk to and answer questions. So thank you. So now we move to the recommendation, and that's that we receive the report. Moved by Robin and seconded by Rebecca. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. So now we move into the next report, which is Destination Wairarapa Quarter Report, and we've got the privilege of having Anna Nelson here to talk to it. And you've been doing an outstanding job, Anna, sort of leading the recovery in that area, and it's been going leaps and bounds, really. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's quite a bit in the report, so I am happy to answer any questions. Anything you'd like to know going forward from here, given what's occurred.
Thank you. I'll take open up the questions.
One question. My understanding is we're better, I like your sort of thoughts on that, we're better placed in other regions to rely on domestic tourism rather than international for the greater percentage.
Yes.
Do you think that holds true now further, or does that domestic tourism that used to come to Warraba May now go to other, well, it used to be focused on international tourism, like go to Royal Queensland, and more redirect?
Yes.
What's your sort of
That is a very good question, and it's quite possible. It's highly competitive now amongst the regions. Thankfully, with the support, we get to continue to do the work that we're doing. So I'd like to acknowledge the funding that Carterton gives to this national library. We are grateful for it. I just want that to be noted. But also we've recently had an announcement that we've had funding from the government to remain competitive, and that will add weight to the programs that we're already doing so that we can continue to make our message clear. Second part to that answer is we've been doing some research about people's propensity to travel at the moment, and it looks to be that the overnight, 2 nights, 3 nights is kind of the sweet spot for people. They don't want to go too far from home because of what has essentially happened now. Therefore, we are actually ideally positioned still for Wellington to be that getaway or escape from the city. I also think, in recessions and times of trial like this, governments tend to get bigger. They employ more people, and it's not a great thing to rejoice about, but we being just an hour away from Wellington means that there is a community of people not too far away who will, their jobs will be reasonably secure, and if nothing else, there will be more people who will be in that position, and we intend to reap the benefits of that.
Anna, you sort of front-footed it with the Warraba Global Development Strategy, making, really pushing, emphasising that how we need to prepare for lockdown again. And I know you'll be working with those in your sector. So a bit different than a shop on the high street. Well, it isn't actually, but I mean, it's a wider net. How those businesses think going to perceive the yesterday's and next.
Yeah. So, as you know, I've been forecasting that for some time, and therefore we have been communicating to our members that they need to be prepared and to make sure that they have their revenue streams less risky, so not putting all the eggs in one basket. So if it is, for example, a restaurant, a hotel, when actually, I should say, we go on to level 3 because it will happen. Processes, if they've been doing it before, make sure that they're all set ready to go again immediately, and if not, to really get on board with that now. But most of the people who I've spoken to today, as I said, we've let them know, they've put plans in place, they're feeling pretty confident. The key thing is, I'm hearing back, is we're all reiterating, it's okay, we've been here before, we've been planning for this, and it's just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other. Another initiative we've been doing when COVID arrived, it became clear that the industry is wider than just the destination warrant membership. So we made the decision to make sure that any new members who wanted to be part of our family, there was free membership until 2021 in March, when we hoped that they would have gone through a good summer and got a bit of cash flow, so that those people can come on board. We can put them on our newsletter, we can include them in our Facebook page, and make sure that we're putting our arms around anyone who identifies as being in the tourism industry, so that they are supported and feel part of a network and other industry people in the same position, and they feel comfortable asking us for assistance or help in whatever shape or form it is.
How many people took up that offer?
So it's at the moment, funnily enough, it's today. We've had about 5 who signed up today, but they've been coming through in dribs and drabs. I think as they realise that things aren't going to be like this, and it is better to be part of a bigger whole than perhaps hanging out on your own. And yeah, as you know, it feels much more comforting to be amongst other people than being cracking on your own.
Any other questions or comment, Rebecca?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think the work on developing a web portal for local event organisers is awesome, and getting a bit of regional coordination on that. I was just wondering if the event centre is part of that.
Yes, so we've been connecting with Jenny. The portal is it's at the testing stage, so I have seen it. It's not quite ready for consumption. We're just working through a few bits and pieces, but Jenny is
Awesome.
all over that.
Cool. And then my other question was kind of off the back of the stats that came out about the July school holiday period, where we did really well as a region. I was wondering if you have any data around the demographics of the visitors that are coming to the Wairarapa at all? Like, is there a specific portion that are coming to visit, or is it quite widespread?
It's the data that we've received. If it's either paymark data, then it's just spend. And when it's the data that came out of Fresh Info, I think it's called, that was purely telecommunications. So that was measuring anyone who was outside of their normal mobile network area, then it picks them up as a visitor. So those numbers that was reported on that particular report doesn't include children, because they don't typically have a mobile phone. Well, certainly young ones don't. There is nothing around the demographics at this point. There is a new measurement system for tourism coming in shortly. That we're just collecting the information from the accommodation providers now, and that's to replace what was used to be the CAM data. That might give us a bit more demographic, but it's very difficult at the moment. A lot of it is through spend or telecommunications data, and it's coming from national level.
I guess you can make some assumptions based on the spend of where it's...
Yes,
yeah.
you could, but there's nothing solid
that
we could say.
Thank you.
Any good question? Yeah, I was just going to say that the way that you use the competition to promote, I think it's fantastic. The 8,000 people that you've got to now include in your database.
Yeah.
So how, when you're engaging with them from this point on, do you bring up the stats of how much engagement you get back from those 8,000 people and just...
Yes, so they're part of a newsletter now. So it'll be things like how many actually open the newsletter and all that sort of stuff. We did, so continuation on from the Great Escape, which was the competition, we've just sent out a series of VIP offers to people and so special things that they can do around the Wairarapa to make them feel special. That newsletter only went out 2 days ago, so I don't actually know what the click-through rates are, but the whole idea is to keep them, again, part of the family, feel like the Wairarapa, particularly those people mostly came from Wellington, that they feel that they can escape the city and come to the big open skies, and that's right. Social distancing isn't a problem because there's not many people here.
Excuse me, sorry, Anna. The Greytown sort of Christmas in July thing, I know in Australia they do that quite a lot up in Blue Mountains. Is that something that possibly next year could be looked at, sort of taking out through the whole of the Wairarapa?
Yeah.
Sort of can we get the different...
Yeah, so that was an initiative that was really driven by Country Village Heaven, which we were involved in the marketing of that, so they asked us to get on board and help market that. So yes and no, in fact, that I think that Christmas thing is they want to own that. I'm mindful that you have a winter festival here in Carterton, and there is talk about something around Matariki. I think it was either Masterton or Martinborough. So there's there's room for an overall winter something umbrella campaign or about the events with each of the towns doing their thing that they've got strength in. And I think that's the key thing, is that, you know, Greytown is heavily retail focused and they've got themselves together in that space. So what works for them not necessarily would work in Martinborough, for example, which is the focus probably more wine and food. So we would certainly promote as an umbrella cool things to do in
that would be a great umbrella for the whole of the Wairarapa as an exclusion, definitely, because as you say, different people will come for different activities, but if we did have a region umbrella or something, I think we've got more cohesion.
Yeah, and I think one thing I've noted is that, I mean, you've got Go Carterton, which is a great platform, and there's the Country Village Heaven and there's the Martinborough Business Association. What we do best is promoting stuff outside of the region. What you guys do best is creating product around your strengths and getting people together. And I think the best thing we can do is take your idea and absolutely amplify it. And rather than trying to get involved in something about people that we don't have as an intimate knowledge about, we focus on doing that outward communication and bring people into the region. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think that's the best way we can coordinate going forward, because you know, the Go Carterton guys just know the region so much better. This particular part of the world is so much better, and we can just take the.
And if they all worked together and did different things, then you would have for your platform, you would actually have more volume to push out there and make it a bigger.
Totally.
That's easy. Yeah. Thank you.
Kia ora, Hannah. I don't know if I've met you personally before, but I hope after this meeting I get to rub shoulders and learn a bit more about the work you do. So I have to declare I'm a semi-knowledgeable individual when it comes to understanding the tourism sector within Wairarapa. I recently moved back in the last year and a half, but just thinking about the post-COVID recovery plan, I said it's a perfect opportunity for New Zealand tourism through a cultural lens. And so you've probably heard a number of things like developments underway, like the Dakins Track, for example. There's potential there in the future to do some really awesome things connecting up all the districts here. So that in line, I'm sort of thinking out loud here, okay, one, how do we get involved in that?
Yep.
You know, but more importantly, and you can set me straight here, I sort of see a window of probably about 3 years out from now, strategically thinking where if we line up all our, cross our T's and dot our I's and line up the ducks, it's a wonderful opportunity to have a bit more involvement of, I say, iwi and hapu in that. Because at the moment, the way I look at it, I sort of think, okay, tourism for itself won't achieve anything within itself, within the industry. It needs the support of the local government, regional councils, the wider community, including iwi and hapu. What I'm not clear about in terms of thinking strategically, what are the priorities within there?
Sure.
And how that involvement becomes accessible for even new players to come into that, which I'm particularly interested in.
Yep, I absolutely agree, 100%. We will be embarking on what's called a destination management plan, which is a framework. Guidelines have come from MB, but this key part of work that I'd like to do in the next 6 months is really understanding the relationship of tourism and the people here in the Wairarapa and the communities involved in it. So all communities and how they engage with tourism and what they want from it, what they don't want from it, how they want the world to see them, what stories do we want to share. So really understanding our region in relation to visitors in particular, but it also will teach us something about ourselves. And I think from that works. So we'll be engaging hopefully TRC Tourism, who are already working with the 5 Towns Trails. So they've done a lot of work in terms of the infrastructure and what's here currently. We want to add the people and the vibe factor to that. And I'm very aware that we have got stories to tell in this region, and there is a massive opportunity to embrace that and use it as a point of difference. I think tourism needs, my personal point of view, and I think most people I've spoken to, needs to be more regenerative. So it's like an ecosystem that goes back to each other rather than take. In some regions, we want to make sure that what we enjoy from tourism as a community, all aspects of the community, other visitors will come and enjoy it too, because it makes it authentic. But we feel that we're part of something that's positive rather than something that's negative. That's where I see the future. And I think, but the work that we're doing will tell us exactly what the people say.
Hey, thank you for sharing some of the aspirations and some of the direction. I'll be a part of the conversation.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? I just want to say, appreciate the work that Destination One was doing. It's quite prevalent, the success that you're making it, and especially to have you at the helm in these times of outstanding. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. And thank you for your support once again.
Okay, so now we move to the recommendations. And there's one, and we've received a report. Can I have a move, please? Moved by Brian and seconded by Rebecca. All those in favour? Thank you. So, looking forward to this one. The Three Waters Services Reform, MOU with the Crown. I'll hand it over to our Chief Executive, Jane Davis.
Kia ora, Mayor. So this is a really good deal. The review of, or the reform, actually we're not talking about review anymore, the reform of water service and in particular for us. It's a big part of what we do. It's a core service that we have been providing for a very long time. And it's really important resource, both in terms of assets, but the service also for our community. So getting it right is going to be really important. The government has signalled very strongly that reform will include a decision for local government territorial authorities to be making next year around whether we retain control and delivery of water. Wastewater. Jury's out on stormwater. So I think that the challenge and the opportunity available for this council is to make sure that whatever is designed and therefore offered to you next year is the best it can be within the interests of the community. So the first part of this process is the offer that's on the table from the government for some direct grant funding with no strings attached to invest in our waters infrastructure over the next 18 months or so. As outlined in the report, the government has put in a pot of money and has now divided it up across the country, and so they have allocated that funding on a formula based on population and land area. Our allocation is $920,000. That in itself is not a small amount. The region has also been given to divvy up amongst itself the underlying allocations to each of the councils. So our mayors met last Friday. It's mentioned in the report. The mayors met on Friday to start talking about how the region is going to allocate that funding out. It was a pretty quick conversation as it turned out, and they have decided that councils will get the same amount of funding as they did in their underlying funding. So for us, that means that we get another $920,000. So our total funding, grant funding that we're eligible for is now going to be $1.84 million. That's a good size of funding for us. So we will do the paperwork, or the region will do the paperwork, and mayors will sign the paperwork just to confirm that. So that's our funding. So we will have as much of that as we. The recommendation from officers, Dave and I, is that you do take that offer. as I said, it is no strings attached. There are some obligations in taking the funding, and the obligation really relates to, in good faith, participating in the design of a new delivery entity.
Thank you. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion. Just before we enter discussion, I'll open up for questions. I know a lot of you attended the 3 Waters Reform Workshop in Wellington, which was available, and those that haven't have been briefed. But I can't say any more than Jane has how important this is for the direction of local government. Is there any questions?
I've got one question, Greg.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, so we have to sign the MOU by end of August, and if we opt in, we've then got to produce a delivery plan by end of September. Are there any concerns about our capacity to produce that delivery plan? Have they provided sufficient clarity on what's to go in it, I guess? Is that something that we have any concerns over, Jane?
No, so I don't have any concerns. I'm sure Dave probably doesn't have any concerns either. So there are some guidelines on what's eligible. It's slightly moving piece. My reading of it, it's actually reasonably broad. I think that the government will consider, they'll be quite loose in the way that they will look at particular projects, not loose in the fact that we actually have to show that we're creating jobs, because this is stimulus money. It's not just money to help councils. This is to create jobs in a COVID environment. And they do need to be related to water services, either infrastructure or operations. And then there's some other sort of conditions around it as well. But we are quite confident that we will be able to identify projects that will get funded. If we submit a program, or if we set up a program and it gets rejected, that doesn't mean that we miss out. We will just keep on talking to Crown Infrastructure to get it right. We're working with other councils in the region as well, so we know what other councils are going to be doing, so we'll be able to learn from them as well and look for opportunities to do shared projects where it makes sense to do shared projects. So Wellington Water, for the metro part of the region, and South Wairarapa have already put a pretty good program together and have made the offer that if we want to, we can join in some of their projects. So once the decision's made today, if you do decide to go for the funding, then we will be talking to those other councils and agencies. And there's going to be a lot of work done through the central government, local government steering group to assist councils as we put those programs together as well. So there's actually quite a lot of work happening in the background around some guidance and knowing what will happen. So what we will effectively do is put a program together, draft program together, and present it to the Infrastructure and Services Committee meeting in August. So that committee can make a call on what projects that the council is going to include in its program. And what we will do is include more projects than we will have funding for. One, just to deal with if anything's actually rejected and it doesn't happen. Or secondly, if when we go to market for some of the delivery of those projects, they come back and it's not realistic, or we can't get them, we can't secure contractors, or we can't secure them in time. So there will be a whole lot of considerations, and we'll work through those with the Infrastructure and Services Committee next month.
Second question. It's going to the Infrastructure and Services Committee to, I guess, to ratify the delivery plan. Does that need to then come back to the council, or is there delegation for the Services Infrastructure Committee to approve that?
No, it doesn't need to come back to council, and we won't really have time either.
No.
Bit more. I'll just check the recommendations. I'm pretty sure there's a recommendation. I'll cover that off, but I'll have a look, make sure that there is delegation.
Okay, and my last question is around co-funding. Thinking back to shovel ready and PGF type stuff, is there any co-funding component or string attached to this funding? Do we need to come up with money from our own coffers to match some of this funding to go towards these projects?
No. So this is, we 100% spend on whatever the projects that we put up, recognising, the government's recognised that we're all delivering projects anyway, according to our annual plan.
Perfect. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Rob. Brian, you got some questions?
Thank you. I don't believe that that it is a no strings attached government handout, just one or two checks. I believe there's a lot of work to do, and my question to Jane and her staff is, do they think that, or Jane think that the council and staff have got time to do all the extra work to fulfil the DIA's contractual agreement? I believe there's monies, according to what I've read, the monies will be paid out quarterly as projects are completed and or partially completed. There's a lot of paperwork and a lot of. I'm just worried about our really busy staff now and whether you're going to have to time.
Yep, a very good question. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we are very aware of that ourselves. We are assuming that we can use some of the funding from the government to set up some resource to support us to actually implement the program. So we will be, one of the projects that we will be putting on our list to be funded will be some support resource to oversee our program. Wellington Water, the initial program I've seen from them, they've done exactly the same. So we're thinking that actually probably all councils will do that. Because yes, none of us have got spare resource. No. We're all actually very, very busy just delivering our annual plans. And we may look at a shared resource for as a program manager across maybe at least Masterton and Carterton, and we'll just think about how we then might get some benefit out of joining with South Wairarapa / Wellington Water as well. So we'll be looking to do that in the most sort of cost-effective way that we can.
Auntie Minnie.
Thank you.
I've always been concerned about our water bores, and during the summertime when the bores go down, I always wanted that. So will we have funding to check that all those that have got bores, make sure that the bores are checked to see that the water, for drinking is healthy under the health regulations?
For all bores across the district?
Yeah, across our district.
There's quite a number of bores across our district. We would just be focusing on our own potable waters.
Well, I'm just talking about from the marae, because we've got a bore, and one of my concerns has been that we don't drink, we check regularly to make sure that the water that's coming out of our bores are safe.
Yeah, so that does raise the issue of non-council water supplies. So the government is very aware that there's a number of community supplies, including marae supplies around the country, a high number that aren't managed by councils. My understanding is that part of the funding that is being made available through this program will be directed at marae and other community supplies. So we will keep a close eye on that with you. So as I've signalled in the report, we're really keen to work with the marae and support you as you work through this reform process as well. Community supplies tend to be higher risk supplies than council supplies just because of the nature of them. There's not the same funding available to protect that water and to bring it up to standard in terms of what that reaches the taps. The government's very aware of that. So I understand that there will be funding that will be available to you. We will keep you informed and work with you to get hold of that funding and then to use it in the best way over the next little while. I think those marae and other community supplies will be captured by whatever comes out of the end of this design process.
Okay. Well, probably another question that I've always worried about is why don't we install tanks for the fresh water for every household? Is there a reason for that? Why we haven't installed tanks especially to conserve our own water?
Yep, so that is something that the council is looking at as a water conservation measure.
Yeah.
But for drinking water,
Yeah.
Communities do need safe drinking water, and this is the whole purpose actually of the reform. It's very hard to guarantee safe water when everyone's only collecting it themselves. So reticulated water that's treated by people who know how to treat it, which is in our case our waters team here, using the right chemicals or the right treatment systems. That's the safest way to deliver water when you've got a bigger community. When you've got smaller numbers, then there's alternatives. But when you've got a mass of people, the safest way to deliver drinking water, which has to be high quality, is through those sort of bigger community council supplies. But from a water resilience and water conservation perspective, this council, we are looking at water tanks, and that's water that you use for your non-potable, non-drinking water and your gardens, for example.
So yeah, and it will certainly save using good quality treated water to put down your toilet or on your garden. Yeah. Tony Hilfiger.
Thank you, Jane, for the update. There's some definite unknowns there. We don't know what we don't know at the moment. And so when I'm thinking about this new regulator, or this proposed regulator, the Taumata Arawai, and the fact that there may be one or more drinking water supplies, I'm just thinking about the place of Te Mano or Te Wai. And so there's a little bit being said in this document that I had a look at. And so the first thing, one of Taumata Arawai's objectives would be to give effect to Te Mano o Te Wai to the extent it applies to the functions and the duties of Taumata Arawai. The bill also that was introduced does not define Te Mano o Te Wai as well. There's a bit of absence of definition in there. And thirdly, I believe, but it could be we believe, that there should be a consistent approach to define Te Mano o Te Wai across this legislation that's proposed. So it talks about there's going to be a Māori advisory group, and they provide different options of what that might look like. I don't know what that means from a council perspective as far as Carterton District Council is concerned and what that representation might look like. But so that's something that's an unknown to me. You may be able to talk more to that, what the process is. The other part too, it almost feels like we could go down the path of privatisation of water, the water supplies. And if we are thinking about that, if that's the way it goes, then I'm thinking about, as a company, how does mana whenua and Māori have a percentage in that company?
So if I answer the last one first. So the government has been very clear in all the communications that have come out right through the review and now the reform stages of the water services project to say that water will never be privatised. So one of the, and part of the design of the new delivery entities will be around, or how do you guarantee it's not going to be privatised? So they've signalled that they think that councils may be the shareholders in the company, or whatever the entity, so it may not be company, whatever the entity is, that councils could be the shareholder, in which case, and that presumably in legislation that shareholding couldn't be sold. So that's one way that the government could be looking at making sure that actually this isn't the first step to privatisation. The Minister has been very clear right from the beginning, she was not interested in privatising water. But this doesn't really address who owns water, it's really who owns the assets.
I was just sort of thinking out loud in response to that in terms of how we manage and mitigate that risk, and I understand that rhetoric, but quite clearly the commercial companies around New Zealand pump water out of the aquifers, for example, Carterton, H2O, and they export overseas large quantities of water. So there's a real commercial gain by those companies who have been given those rights and privileges by those local councils to do that under those consents. And so using that as an example, it doesn't really align with the government's promise of it's not privatised, because at the end of the day, someone's making revenue out of it. And so what I'm saying is potentially there's a potential grievance there for Māori if it's not carefully managed.
Yeah, so that is a conversation that the Minister has already having and will continue to have, the whole issue of who owns it is a debate that's been happening actually for quite a few years. I'm sure that you know that at the regional council level they're more involved with those conversations than we are, just because they are the regulator for water and they're the ones that give consents for whoever wants to use water to take water. We're not directly involved with that. So I think in terms of the involvement of iwi, again, the Minister has been very deliberate in ensuring that Māori iwi hapu are involved with, one, the design of this stuff, but actually all those other decision processes that are going on at the moment. Again, these are happening way outside our purview. We're trying to involve ourselves and we'll be involving ourselves with the process, but there's a whole lot of other things that are happening that the Crown is leading itself rather than councils.
Would there be a suggestion then, given that there's greater influences are happening elsewhere, that as a council or as a collection of councils throughout the Wairarapa, that we can actually provide a stronger voice, whether that changes direction or influences those future decisions? Can we do that as a collaboration with all parties in the wider community?
Yes, I think we can. I think the regional council is definitely working in that space. Yes, and as local councils, we could potentially do more. I mean, I think that the reality is that when we're involved, say, in workshops, which councillors will have a number of opportunities, that we make sure that you're coming with us. So you're sitting around the table alongside our councillors, sitting around the table, having those conversations with the various teams that are designing this new world for us.
Can I just conclude, and this is just for everyone's benefit, if you think about the word why, you might not have made this connection already, but in the Māori worldview, when I meet you, if I don't know you, it's called waikwe, so that's like, who are you? Well, the essence of why goes back to the inception of conception. And so when the waters come together and you're created as an individual human being, called waikwe, which is really saying, what is your ancestry, what is your whakapapa, what is your lineage? So it's, why is the most precious thing in that context? So hence a wider discussion there.
Okay, thank you. So we want to have a bit of discussion as well. So is there any further questions before we start discussion? Yeah.
Just one, and you just going on from what you said around the workshops that are coming up or something. So that was my question: is do we have any further guidance around what that co-design is going to look like, and at what level is it going to happen? Is it going to happen at individual council level, or is it more like feeding into the Three Waters steering group?
So the steering group is the key, sitting around the table doing the detailed stuff. I anticipate that the steering group will insist on a number of workshops right through this period with councils. I don't think they will engage directly with every council. I think that they will be looking to probably engage with regions sort of councils, just for practicality. They've got quite an ambitious timeline to get this through. I understand that there is some discussion between the local members of the steering group and others just on the reality of the timetable. And that actually my observation that the local government members on that steering group are doing a really good job at advocating for our interests, and I haven't heard anything that's coming through that actually would be inconsistent with what we've been wanting and saying and doing. For that wider engagement, but like I said, I doubt very much it will be a single council. I think we'll be working with the other councils and talking as a wider group.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Can I ask just one more? The 75 and 25 split for working out how the money would be allocated to districts, did we get any response or clarification on whether they were considering the population of the reticulated supply and the land area of the reticulated supply, or were they looking at the whole district population and whole district land area?
I'm not sure. I imagine it's the whole district, but it is what it is. That is the split, and that's what we've got. So we can't revisit that anyway, even if we didn't agree.
No, I wasn't looking to revisit it. I was just, I think it is probably the whole district. That's cool. That was my last question.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll open up to discussion now, and if a question comes out, I mean, we can answer that. So I think it's important that we all have a comment. So Russell, might start with you being the chair of Infrastructure and Services Committee. Would you like to make some comments, please?
Yep. Yeah, it's, I mean, at the moment, what we've got in front of us is supposedly a non-binding agreement. They're going to give us some money to do some work and look at our waters. Brian raised some good points as to whether it will be totally like that or not. But from what I've read at the moment, there's very little risk for the council for opting in at this stage. And there's still a heck of a lot of stuff to come out of the discussions going round and round and round and round. Some of my concerns aren't so much on where the waters go, but it's when and if we were to lose waters, what we would get it replaced with, how that would be funded, and what impact that would be on our ratepayers. I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Because you're on the screen as well, Rob, I'll ask you to comment.
Yep. Yeah, I like that there's the possibility of let's call it easy money, but similar to Brian, and I expressed it earlier, I have some concerns at whether or not the money will actually be forthcoming and whether we'll actually be able to spend it all. I think the strings, when you think of the way the PGF has been delivered, shovel ready and stuff, it's we might find some friction. I guess one thing that I want us to bear in mind as we go through this process is that Carterton's a small TA in a large group of TAs, but our local iwi, our hapu with Hurunui-Rangi, are a very small hapu in a country of many, many, many hapu. So I'd like us to bear in mind and basically have each other's backs, much as Jane suggested before about looking out for each other. I think that's going to be really important. When I look through the stuff that's been released around the private water services, and particularly around Marae, there doesn't seem to be anything anywhere that's definitively says that it will be funded. The decision as to whether and how much it will be funded is yet to be made. So I think we need to be really careful and make sure that we bear the interests of Marae in mind as we move forward. The fact that this allocation is based on a district population and a district land area implies to me that all water services within that catchment may be included. So, we should maybe be open-minded. If money for Marae is not forthcoming through another means, maybe some of this money might be applied to it. So like I say, I think we need to be open-minded and just make sure that we consider the whole district and not just the reticulated town bit when we consider what are the best options for the district going forward. That's me.
Yep, thank you very much, Rob. So I might head down this side of the table, Stefan.
Thanks, Greg. I agree with the first point that Brian raised. I do think it's voluntary and non-binding, especially in this first tranche. So I think the only risk will be extra resources, which I think Jane covered off in regards to the work with Masterton. Pure from sort of a macro lens, I mean, it's 6% of our annual budget we're just getting, and spending it with the right resources, I think, is probably going to be the biggest challenge. If we get the extra part with the mayor's agreed on, we're looking at 12% of the annual budget we're getting. So looking strategically how we spend that on otherwise what would be rates increases over the sort of next decade, I think there's a lot of opportunity. So I strongly support this first phase and like how it's non-binding going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Jill.
Yep. Obviously, I support the first phase as well. Really, it's a no-brainer for this particular tranche one, what they call it. Some exciting things that we could probably spend the money on. I guess, as a lot of people have been saying, this is the start of a big change in the way that local government is going to be structured. So I guess we're moving into a new world. and that could be quite exciting. The future of Local government. So that's what we're doing this now. It's probably the biggest change, I guess, since 1989.
Thank you, Jill. Rebecca.
Yeah, overall I support tranche one. I think well, obviously we could use the additional funding. There's no end of projects that could go towards. I really like that the government has put forward this proposal of co-design, and I think there is an element of risk within that we don't really know where it's going to go and where it's going to end up, but I do appreciate that they have given the government the opportunity to participate in that, and I think it's our duty as a local council, and if we really believe in working with the government, we should be putting our best foot forward and participating in that process and making it as good as it could be. Failing that, it is non-binding, so we do have an out clause if we want it. But yeah, overall, there's a number of boxes that have been ticked for me throughout this, or the MOU and the documents, such as the principles. I really the mechanisms that protect against privatisation, that's a big one for me. And also the interests and well-being of local communities will be considered, and I feel like that issue has been brought forward within the MOU and highlighted, which I appreciate as well. Just as a comment, I wonder as a council, how can we use some of these funds to really develop capacity within our staff and within the community and local businesses. The concerns is there going to be enough capability within the sector to do all this work when every single council around New Zealand is going to be advertising for these positions. So yeah, I just wonder how we can support our local economy in some ways and develop that to meet that need. So yes, overall very in favour of this and look forward to seeing where it goes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Auntie Winky, any comment? No? Okay, thank you. Tarangi Kakadu?
Yeah, I think this is navigate ourselves well through the first stage and see where we go from there. As long as we communicate and having that conversation, open conversation about all the different priorities and the dynamics and needs and wants and interests. Yeah, I think that's a good place.
Thank you. Robin.
Completely agree with what you said, Stefan. It's it's $1.84 million. That is a grant that we don't have to pay back. I have faith in our management that they will be able to come up with plans to spend the money in 18 months and boost the local economy. And to promote everything. I'm very much in favour of this first tranche, and I mean, sort of don't want to turn down $1.84 million to invest in some more infrastructure that isn't going to come out of our ratepayers' pockets. Hey, Rob, just in reply to your query, some FAQs were released by the Central Government Steering Committee, and in particular, ministers have made several adjustments to the general approach outlined above to take account of a small number of exceptional circumstances. So $30 million has been set aside for non-council rural drinking water supplies to help address the challenges these suppliers are facing in delivering safe drinking water to consumers. There are a range of private supply arrangements in rural and remote areas, and affordability challenges are particularly acute for some non-council drinking water suppliers, including Marae. So hopefully that answers a bit of the question. And I've already had a conversation with Jane particularly about this, and she's just reinforced that our council staff will be working with Marae to ensure that they get their fair share of this funding. So I'm in favour of tranche one.
Thank you, Robin. Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely in favour of tranche one. Just a couple of another consideration that I'd like to see for some of our council project would be our eastern development, our greenfield development, installing infrastructure out there for potable and wastewater. I think it is a great opportunity to develop that area without being as such a bigger burden on the ratepayer. My other concern is the assurance that we do need for the three waters to remain a public entity. We don't want to go down the same track as we have with losing all our individual power boards, power suppliers to large conglomerates. I'm just worried about our individuality being taken out of it, and that would be one of my big concerns. So I will be making sure that we do remain in the public ownership, although that can change from one government to the next. So it's hard to guarantee. So I don't know quite how we do that, but I'd like to see some sort.
Thank you, Brian. Greg, I definitely support the tranche run, joining up with that. I think it's, like Jill said, it's a no-brainer for us to hopefully get a couple of other projects on the go or through. I do have a reservation as to what the government's going to expect of us if they do take the assets off us. That kind of worries me. What are we going to be doing? Because whether we're going to even be necessary as elected members, I'm not dead sure. So, and also with looking at tranche 2, there's so many questions that they need to answer in regards to with previous council elected members being proactive in upgrading our infrastructure. Are we going to get any recompense for that and so forth going forward? So, yeah, there's nothing else to think about.
Thank you. The way I look at it, it's based around outcomes really, and we want the best outcome for our community. And if that means that they're going to get good, reliable, safe, quality water and infrastructure, that is affordable. I mean, it's got to be good. And we've got the opportunity here to enter in good faith and be in the room and help steer that discussion. And tranche 1 is certainly non-binding. So I think we definitely need forward. We need to really think about our community, and I know there'll be opportunity to consult, which we will do. And also, there'll be a multitude of factors, especially resulting around evenness and fairness of what some councils have spent on infrastructure and others haven't. And there's all those sorts of issues to be addressed. And also have in mind too, as we get this tranche 1 funding, look how we spend it as well, because if you look at what the end result was, we really want to be very wise in what we spend it on. I think you know what I mean by that. Yeah. So if there's no further discussion, I'll open up for any other discussion before we move to recommendations.
I just wanted to make an acknowledgement. I was remiss not to acknowledge Councillor Rob Stokely pointing out something in terms of private water supplies and services, and that has been clearly defined at this point in time. So thank you for pointing that out, Rob. Appreciate that, because it means there's a conversation to be had, whether that's front, right, or centre, somewhere in there.
Thank you. James, confirming the delegations for the infrastructure.
Yeah, so can I just make it really clear, change the 10th recommendation to notes officers will prepare a draft delivery plan for consideration by the Takeout Council, the Infrastructure and Services Committee, ahead of and delegates to that committee decisions on the delivery plan ahead of submitting the plan to Crown Infrastructure Partners. I'll read that again. Notes officers will prepare a draft delivery plan for consideration by the Infrastructure and Services Committee and delegates to that committee decisions on the delivery plan ahead of submitting the plan to Crown Infrastructure Partners.
Everyone all good for that? Thank you. So what I'm going to do now is the recommendations are on the screen and we all have read them, we know what they are. So I'm going to take them all together with the 10th one that Jane has just read out together. So can I have a mover, please? Moved by Robin and seconded by Brian. All those in favour? Anyone against? No one against, carried. Congratulations, guys. Right. Is that Wine District Plan, Joint Committee Establishment and Appointment, Infrastructure and Planning Regulatory Manager Dave Giddings. Can you talk to the report, please?
This is it's gone to the three councils and setting up the joint committee of for the Orange Combined District Plan review. So it sets in place that committee and delegates to undertake those hearings and hearings and to take the role of representing all three councils and making changes to the Wairarapa Combined District Plan. I would note here that the risks in the 9.5, and just point that out, it's not quite as large as the impact that the water review may have on council is the review of the RMA, and this was before actually at the same time as the release of the committee's large impact on what we do in terms of reviewing our district and how we go about it. So if this was to go ahead today, we'll put that in front of the joint committee through the officers and through councils as to how best we can undertake the review and look at the parts of the Wairarapa Combined District Plan that most affect us and most want to change immediately, but perhaps recommend that we hold back on a full review of the Wairarapa Combined District Plan at that stage.
That time I think we'll see.
Well, we would really need to know what the intent of the incoming government is. We are aware that this was commissioned, the review was commissioned by the present government, and we've had political statements from the national body that would say they would get rid of the RMA. The indications would be that the RMA is indeed in for a change, but as to what degree, we won't really know. It would be nice to have some indication from the new government whether the recommendations from that review were to be taken in totality, or whether there's going to be sections of that review that would be accepted or not, or otherwise. And that would probably give us a bit more of a steer as to how we go with our combined district plan review, given that some of those recommendations do change the very fundamentals of our district plan. So it would make sense to make sure that we have a good steer prior to embarking on the $1.5 million review of our plan. And we may have to end up redoing 4 or 5 years to actually make sure that we're in the right place before we start it. But there are some parts of our plan that we would like to change. Eastern Growth Area, for example.
Other questions?
I'm just wondering around the process of like engaging with the councils as a whole. Will there be like some workshops to develop it, or will that only happen within the committee?
In what regard, the scope of the district plan review?
No, not the scope. I guess more of the detail, like what things need to be changed, or like just general feedback and community engagement. Will that happen Like, will that be primarily the job of the committee, or will some of that come back to councils as well?
Primarily the job of the committee, and if you bring that back to the three councils, then we're in danger of litigating what's already gone through the committee process. So it would be have this as one of the separate committee to have that reduction in litigation.
I would imagine though, councillor, that the committee would want to seek the views of councils if it's making significant changes, because it wouldn't be wanting to make changes that the council will have to make the changes technically, or legally under that. I'm sure it won't want to be in a position where it's recommending changes that councils will do. So I'd be surprised if the committee didn't have some way of
Any other questions? Have another discussion? Is there any discussion?
No, my opinion is basically is what Dave has already pointed out, that it is pretty straightforward, but until we decide, the next government decides what they're going to do with the Resource Management Act, it's obviously it's still up in the air a little bit, so we can only wait and see.
Yeah. And then that's noted on the recommendations. Yeah. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we'll go straight to the recommendations then. There's 10 of them. They're up on the screen and you all had to read them, so I'll take them all together. Can I have a mover, please? Steve, and a seconder.
I'll second that.
Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you, Rob. I'll save you for the next one. All those in favour, please.
Aye.
Thanks, Dave. Wanneroo Catchment River Care Group MOU. Jane, want to speak to that?
Got 625.
Oh, sorry. I zipped on here. Too keen, eh? Loading zone, 1 High Street North, Dave.
Quite the same as a DIA for waters or an RNA review, but just for waters. Yeah, we've had a request that the 2 car parks outside TLC car park, outside TLC business, be turned into a 5-minute loading zone. Normally, any council-owned property, you could make a change yourself under the bylaws, but this is a state highway, so you would, if you were in contact state NZTA, Whakakotahi, is the name, and said they would be open to changing those, allowing us to change those car parks into loading zones, if you agree or not.
Anything to be clarified? Any questions?
Can I just ask a question? The parking spaces outside the old post office, are they still 5-minute parking spaces, those 3?
So.
That's coming out, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, just one question. The current car parks out there, they've got a time on them, so it's from like 7 in the morning till 6 at night or something. Will that apply to these ones as well?
We could do that, so that'd be a loading zone during work hours.
Yeah.
Yes, we could make that.
Okay. I'm just thinking for the people who park there for like event centre events or going to Volta, that'd be outside of that, yeah, that period anyway. So yeah. Cool.
Okay. Discussion.
Steve,
go ahead.
Dave, I'm curious as to why the owner's not keen on using the back entrance, even though health and safety, saying that people access the back of his shop, he could certainly set up some kind of buzzer or something to let them know that someone's there. To me, having trailers pulling up on the main road and trying to undo strops and unload a tractor or whatever off the back of a trailer just doesn't make sense to me. And especially when you've got an entrance right behind where you're going to be putting to a loading zone. You're going to have someone at the back of a trailer, you're going to have someone coming off the back of it, and someone trying to drive in that driving, anything could happen there. So I have concerns about that.
What's happening currently? Because there's no access at the back currently, is there? And now the driveway is not accessible.
I actually saw, it's quite funny, somebody doing that. The other day they pulled up out the front and they had a couple of lawnmowers on the back and just wheeled them up onto the pavement and into the shop.
Okay.
Thankfully there were 2 parks out the front so they could do as well. But I think that's what they are pretty much doing. Or going down the other thing I have seen is down the old driveway, the old entrance way to the vets. Just sort of pulling in there, but the problem was then trying to reverse out onto the high street because obviously that's now been blocked off and they couldn't go around the back of the building. The car and trailer.
Just a question, Dave, and I'm not sure if you can answer it, but asking 2 car parks, is that because of the trailer situation?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah, so you can pull.
That's right. It's changing 2 to 19 to the 5 rather than adding 2.
Yeah, what would make that a loading bay?
Yeah, but that's why it's 2.
Okay, Brian, you've got
A question, Dave, you can answer this or not, but is their back entrance not accessible at the moment, or is it accessible? And the only problem is that the shop, there's only one person at business at some time.
I understand that it's a multiple number of reasons that they want that, is that it becomes an issue for having someone watching out for staff in staffing, that they have a single person in that direction, and I understand they're all worried about the health and safety issue around. They do a lot of their servicing outside.
My big concern is, well, I've got 2 concerns for a start. One is taking 2 normal car parks out of our CBD area, which I don't think is advisable and not fair on the rest of the businesses. The other concern I have is delivery trucks for other businesses as well, using that as a loading and unloading zone and blocking up those 2 car parks basically full time, all day. I believe that most of the businesses in the CBD have back entrances and loading and unloading zone facilities at the back of them. So that would be my big concerns, that those loading zones, perhaps they should be developed better, and so they're more usable and more user friendly than they are at the moment.
okay. So we're heading in that down direction. Robin, have you got a comment?
With the new development going on in the access area, what sort of access is that going to have from the state highway down to the back of the property? Do we know if that would be an easier access for people to pull off the state highway, go down the side of TRC, offload at the back and then continue out through Ballinger Place?
I'm not sure. I know that a branch of the building was sold. I'm not sure who bought that, whether it's connected to that, and therefore may stop that.
Might stop that access.
I don't
so that access way could stop anyway. Yeah.
I'm unsure. Could be, may not.
Ballinger Place is a road.
It's a road.
Yes, but I assume we're talking about the entrance from State Highway to the old vets that may stop.
Yes,
yeah, I was just you were mentioning going up.
Yeah, but I was saying you're pulling off State Highway if they could do that loop because of that new development out the back, and we don't know what it's going to be and who's bought it. At the moment, there's currently space that people can pull a truck and trailer up or car and trailer up and turn around easily, but depending on what that new development is, there may not be, or I suppose my question is, will there be space for them to still be able to do that?
So the old Vets building that they're doing, they do have plans, obviously, building consent plans, but I'm not.
It's not council land.
No.
And I don't have those.
Okay, thank you. Victoria Coffetti, have you got a comment?
I'm not overly in favour of that area of parking on the street, so I've just been listening intently, and I'll just go with the true consensus from everyone.
Thank you. Auntie Lee?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, Rob.
Yeah, no, you just zoned out for a little bit there.
We'll skip you for a second. We'll go to Russell. Russell, you got comments?
Yeah, I'm not in favour of this. I don't agree with it. And I think it's going to create more health and safety issues than it's going to solve. So if we want to start looking at creating loading zones for businesses throughout the main street or the high street or the state highway too, I think it's a bigger issue than just looking at it, putting one outside TLC. So I won't be voting in favour of this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Rob, do you want to comment?
So I went down and walked the ground around the back of the property and spoke to Steve this morning to understand what the issues were with that back entrance, because when you pull up there today, there's heaps of space. So previously, when Ranchman's were operating, most of that space back there is actually Ranchman's car parking, and you can't occupy it or use it because there were cars parked there. They used to have problems out front because of other business owners parking up for the day. And that's actually not a problem now because the Ranchman's business is shut down. So all of those business owners and their staff are actually parking around the back in the Ranchman's car park. Obviously, that's not sustainable because when they start to develop that site, they will reclaim that space and fence it off and develop it for their own purposes. But for the moment, the frontages or the parks along State Highway 2 are more available to shoppers because all of the staff are parking around the back. That back entrance, the main problem they have for the health and safety thing is the previous owner used to receive a lot of stuff through the back there and used to have a really slack attitude towards health and safety with people just wandering through. And they have people wandering in with lit cigarettes, people wandering in with jandals when there's machinery operating and mowers running and stuff, and they just can't allow that to happen. When they've got just one person in the shop, they can't monitor that back entrance. So that all they can do is block it off and say, look, no, we can't receive stuff through there except by arrangement. They can't receive things coming in just ad hoc. In terms of turning around and stuff, trucks coming in there, even with the Ranchman's car park as it is, trucks coming in actually have to back all the way back out through to William Wong Place because of the constraints that are there. So if a truck struggles, then turning a whole trailer around's going to be a problem as well. I wonder, going to what some of the others have said, treating it as a loading zone, the main problem that was originally causing them consternation was people parking in those parks long term. So particularly other business owners and staff who'd be there all day. If we just had a half an hour or a 60-minute max type thing, then you'd move those people on, and then you'd have just genuine shoppers who may stop for 5 minutes to go to the cafe, or half an hour, 3/4 an hour for lunch. Just having a not 5 minutes, but 30 or 60 along that stretch might achieve the aim without creating the focus on those two specific parks. That's just my thoughts.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm in favour of these loading zones, or even if we did them as 5-minute car parks, and what the recommendation says now. I think our high street could actually use some more short-term parking, especially for the people around lunch hour that go to the Carterton bakery, just popping in to grab sandwiches and off again. And just having that space would be good. So yeah, I'm in favour of it.
Okay, anything, Joe?
Yeah, I guess maybe we should be looking at the whole of
High Street. But of course, I guess got to go. I guess the main person, the people who are going to actually decide whether or not this health and safety issue is going to be Waka Kotahi. So I guess if we pass our recommendation on, then see what they think. Anyone got any ideas about how to start with another jurisdiction?
Sorry, if I could just butt in and say one more thing. We're talking about putting some quite sort of onerous restrictions on a couple of parks. To my knowledge, we don't actually employ a parking warden. So if we create this thing, are we creating a rod for our back by then having to go out and police it as well?
Okay, Stefan.
Thank you, Greg. I don't feel it's my place to tell a business is wrong, and if they're asking us to help, then we can generally go through recommendations. I still think across the road are the same, 2 5-minute parks, or up to recent history was, so that may have recently gone, but I still think across the road is a similar thing, not loader zone, but 5 minutes. I agree with a lot of things here, but with Rob, maybe 10 minutes or 20 minutes might have the same purpose. Regarding health and safety, I think it actually increases health and safety. There's currently people parking 100, 200 metres up the road and then walking down with their lawnmower or till, so being right in front of the shop may actually increase health and safety. I know what others say regarding trailers and whatnot, but I think that's such a minority. I don't think that is likely to happen. I think it's mainly very small. As the business owner said to us, I think elderly people with sort of moles and whatnot. So in summary, I will be supporting this, maybe meeting it for 10 minutes, but I'm not sure if that's zero.
Okay, from my point of view, if you're able to use that back entrance, it makes sense. However, we are, the owner of the business has said that doesn't work for him. We push ourselves as a proactive business, want to make things happen, council. I mean, I think the risk of doing that is not huge. We could always make it a 6-month trial if need be, providing Waka Kotahi is keen on pursuing it. So yeah, I think it's worthwhile pursuing. So
I think so. If it maybe isn't a loading bay, because already outside the post office it did have that 5-minute park. That did stretch to 10-15 minutes. You know, we've got 90 minutes parking down the high street and the same cars outside the same shop for the whole day anyway. So yeah, it would be a trust basis, and obviously Waka Kotahi will have the ultimate decision. Yeah, so.
okay, we've given a really good discussion, and I'm sure Stephen's going to be happy that we've had this much discussion on it. So I'd like to move to recommendations. There's 3 of them there. We'll take them together.
Excuse me, Greg.
Yeah.
Could I just, before you move them, can I amend the second one? Just to be really explicit around what we are proposing. I'd like to suggest that we propose 5-minute parking, not an actual loading zone. So just 5-minute parking between 8 and 5 p.m.
So that would be 2 car parks, 5-minute parking for both of those two. Yeah.
So can I move by Rebecca that amendment, seconded by Robert? All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Sorry, Rob, are you for or against? For. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the amendment is carried. So we've got the 3 recommendations for the second one. Jane, can you read out the second one? Yes.
Agrees to seek approval from Waka Kotahi NZTA to alter 2 existing car parks outside 1 High Street North TLC services to 5-minute parking between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m.
So we've got 3 recommendations. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Rebecca, seconded by Stefan. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. All those against?
Russell's against.
So correct, 3 against, and everyone else in favour?
For those voting against, want to have their vote recorded.
Sorry, there's 3 against.
Yes.
Who was the third? Russell, Brian.
No,
Steve.
these
And
guys don't want
Steve.
it recorded.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. So we now move on to the Wanyuru Catchment River Care Group MOU. Jane.
Kia ora Nia. So this is a care group that's been set up for that particular catchment. We haven't been involved with the early discussions and establishment of the care group for I'm not too sure what reasons. I don't suppose it really matters. That the invitation has come to this council to be part of that group. As outlined in the discussion, at this point I've had absolutely no signal or indication that they want funding from us. They just want us to be part of the care group with a representative on the group itself and to provide technical advice as and when they might need it from us, assuming that we hold it. So my recommendation is that we put our hands up for this one. It certainly sits comfortably with our community outcomes and where this council is going in terms of partnering with community groups and so on. Councillor Grady might give a little bit more knowledge of this.
So definitely no cost to us, and
At this
they've
point,
got
Steve, no, there's nothing in the material that they've provided us that is that funding is part of that
funding, and they've got defined. They've got agreed 1.5 million, and it could be as much as 3 million.
Yep.
So the first job they're going to do is to create a restoration. It's mainly willow clearing, which is a real big issue. Plus, obviously, restoration after that. So they're going to do a plan. So it's really just keeping in touch with what they're doing. The reason that they asked us that is I understand that 20% of the river is actually in the CDC jurisdiction, and a bridge was mentioned that we might be interested in knowing what's going to happen during the restoration. So yeah, meetings will be quarterly, so not too onerous, but we'll just keep in touch with what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Discussion?
Just a comment.
Yeah.
I'm having a dementia moment, but the elderly gentleman that was welcomed last year at the citizenship ceremony, who's part of that group, he approached me last year. This group we're talking about today, whether we could lend or provide support to some of the place names, particularly the Māori place names. That came at the same time as that project with the New Zealand Geographic Board. That project. Unfortunately, it wasn't timing in terms of us and our resource and availability to actually complete that process. But I've just forgotten the gentleman's name, elderly gentleman.
I know who you mean.
Yeah. So I am keen to, I guess from the perspective of Hirangi and Mana Whenua to sort of strengthen that relationship, and actually if that does become a need, then perhaps we can provide some support and help around.
Cool. I shall mention that to him.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, are we ready to go to the recommendations? This is three of them there, on the screen. Take them all together. Have a mover, please. Seconded by Steve. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you. So we now will go to the wastewater treatment plant upgrade stage 3 contract. You've seen the report, and Jane, would you like to talk to it?
Yes, so Councillor Dallas left the room. Take that, Casey? I record that Councillor Dallas left the room. So the tenders committee, as outlined in the report, went out to the market to get somebody to do the stage of the project. Unfortunately, the costs that have come back exceeded actually our engineer's estimate. Since the preferred tenderer was identified and agreed by the tenders committee, Matt has been doing some great work with the preferred supplier, ordered from Stevens, and has got the price down, not by screwing them down in terms of what they want to spend, but actually just the methodology and the materials that are going to be used. If there's any questions, obviously of the technical nature, Matt's here to answer your questions. I'm sure the technical committee will also be happy to ask questions.
I've got a question. What we're finding. So, referring back to our earlier discussion on the pre-water services reform, the grant. My understanding is we won't go and use the grant for this in our annual plan. Is that correct? Or is there a way we can sort of?
Yes, I mean, there may be a way that we could use some of the funding for the overspend or the bit that's over our budget, but whether you necessarily want to do it, this will be loan funded. And one of the considerations that you might want to give, or the infrastructure and services might want to give to the list of projects and how we might allocate the funding that's come to us is this is loan funding, and the government's already signalled that if an entity is set up to deliver water services and we transfer our assets to them, they will also be taking our debt. So in terms of the issues for ratepayers, we'd need to think about if there's any gain from spending that money to deal with some of that debt or not. It's a little bit complex, it's not as straightforward as I've just presented it, but yes, so we will have a look at that, and we have, Phoebe's already had a quick look at whether we can do that or not. We think we probably can, so we will, the Infrastructure and Services Committee might want to think about that.
Any other questions? Rebecca?
Yeah, just a question for you, Matt. I was wondering if you could just explain around reducing retentions and or bond amount and some of the contingency provisions, and so the percentages have been reduced. Just wondering if you can explain, is there additional risk to council and what does that look like?
Normally on a traditional contract you have a retention amount which you take away from every progress payment claim up to approximately $200,000. Completed. There's a certain amount of cost to that because that's money that doesn't go back to the contractor. So we felt there was reduced risk in the fact that we entered into a collaborative type discussion with them. Yes, we were trying to add value, but there was also some additional cost savings. Some of those cost savings are through that. But we can go through a process once the tender is let to allow a bond in lieu of retentions. And that potentially could be a little bit cheaper for them as well. Reducing the risk down, I think, is just an indicator that we've got a good relationship with them, and that's how we intend to continue.
Russell, you've been involved in the process. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It's a good process to date, and it's certainly been worthy of finding a preferred tender and then entering into negotiations with them. The negotiations that I've had and the savings that have been able to be made to date, I believe, are all relatively low risk. We had good discussion around the contingency and the retentions, and I'm happy with the position that we've landed on. There's also very real possibilities of further savings as the project goes on. And I believe that the contractor we're looking at will be able to, be negotiated with in the future. So I'm happy where we've ended up on this one.
Yeah, great, thank you. And it's been great having you sort of steering that ship as well. Thank you. Steve, you've been involved in the process as well. Comments from you?
Yeah, I just reiterate what Russell said. We've had some really good discussion around it, and I thank Matt and the other officers for their time that they've spent with Orson Stevens to get us down to this figure. There's been some changing of materials as such, but yes, the risk involved is, we're going to end up with a good product at the end. So I think we've got a good contractor here.
Yeah, I mean, I sit on the committee ex officio, and certainly acknowledge the work that's gone on with the management and Matt to entering those negotiations. So, any other further questions, comments?
Yeah, just one question around the budget deficit of $350,000. So I'm assuming that's an additional, but that's going to be borrowed. Does that impact on our annual plan projected figures for this year, or is it relatively negligible?
Very minor. So
Okay.
you're looking at the depreciation effect of that debt essentially. That's the real kind of cash effect of that, which is small because the life of the asset is so great. Yeah, so it's not a $350,000 cash effect.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussions, we'll go to the recommendations. So the tender committee recommends that council has 1, 2, 3 and 4 recommendations. Please. Moved by Steve and seconded by Robin. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Some of that, Robin, yes, into there. Thank you.
That faces with books.
So now we have changes to the delegations manual, and I'd like to invite Corporate Services Manager Phoebe Jones to the table, please.
For another 2 hours and 12 minutes.
Right, so this is a relatively straightforward one, which has just arisen out of some internal audit work that the buildings team is doing, which they kind of do in the lead up to their annual audits. And so they've just identified a couple of tweaks for the delegations manual. And then the other thing is just fixing up some job title changes and things so that it's all consistent. So I'll take the report as read. I don't think there's anything significant in there, but I think to take any questions.
Questions? No? Discussion?
We still have a painting, so don't get rid of it.
Yes. Okay, if there is none, we'll go straight to the recommendations. There's 2 of them there, 1 and 2. We'll take them together. They're up on the screen. Can I move it, please? Jill, and seconded by Rebecca. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So now we have changes to committee appointments and governance group membership. Page 157. It's reports from me. I'll take it as read, and it's pretty straightforward, but I'm happy to take any questions. Jane?
So thank you. Just to absolutely clarify, the change to the Infrastructure and Services Committee, so I have recommended to the Mayor that we have Robin appointed to that committee, particularly around the waters stuff. That's primarily because of her role as the financial portfolio leader and the Deputy of Water and Risk, recognising that the changes that are going to happen through the waters reform potentially are going to have significant financial some risks as well. So that was the reason why I recommended to Greg that we made that change.
Yeah. It gives us more strength there, and
there is an expectation that the chair of that committee will also be all over the waters reform.
Yeah.
So as officers, we'll work with, if we make those change, we'll work with both the chair and Councillor Cherry Campbell on the waters reform.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with the Hood Aerodrome Advisory Group, I mean, I'm proposed to be the alternate on it, but I wonder, do we have any way of providing feedback on the terms of reference at all?
As far as I see, the seat, haven't we? Yeah.
Because there's just a couple of things in there that I was, I just wanted to highlight that I'm not terribly comfortable with. This one's not really a big deal, but on page 160, the sixth bullet point down, it says members will act at all times, blah, 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 will not use social media to communicate. I just thought that needs to be, made a bit more explicit.
I think that says not take any issues to media or use social media to communicate specific issues. I think it's in relation to any issues that may arise out of meetings, which...
Yeah, it's not very specific. But then I guess the main thing I have an issue with is the fact that the Chief Executive of Marsden District Council is going to be appointing the members alongside the chairperson with the recommendations of the chairperson, but she's also appointing the chairperson. So I feel like, they've just been given $10 million of taxpayer funding, and then this advisory group is supposed to be guiding where the Hood Aerodrome's going, but it's not very, I don't feel like it's very representative, even though we're very thankful to have a position on that advisory group and thankful that they've invited us, but I'm just a little bit aware of the conflicts of interest there, and it doesn't seem very transparent. Provide that feedback at all, but I'm just a bit uncomfortable about it.
Okay. Other thoughts on that issue?
I understand Rebecca talking about the social media. That probably does need to be clarified as to if you're a member, you can't really communicate as a democratic representative in the community.
I think if you take it as, I understand what you're saying, that definitely needs clarification, or that it says members will not take any issues to media or use social media to communicate. And it's otherwise, so I guess if there's disagreements around the table, it's actually not promoting that through any media aspects. That's how I've read it.
That's how I read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last one changes the terms of reference and refers to how to revise these, and it requires agreement and acceptance by Marsden District Council and the June.
What page is that, Greg?
It's the very last page.
Last
Okay. Okay.
So, but basically,
just an observation. I'm just looking at the Hood Aerodrome here. Their underpinning principles for this strategic advisory group. Just out of interest, I noticed those are copy and pasted from the Marsden District Council annual plan. So yeah, I don't know if it's their underlying principles or it's the Marsden District Council's principles, but it's just an observation.
So are we happy to make those appointments and then address those issues?
So the reference to the chair, appointment of the chair and appointment of the members wouldn't be able to be addressed post. You'd have to either make that a condition of, changing that a condition of your membership, or to agree to become a member but request that change before everything starts.
I would feel uncomfortable about making it a condition of our membership. I guess I'm just pointing out as something that I'm uncomfortable about, and perhaps, Robin, if you feel like you support that, you could raise that at one of their meetings, which may be too late by then, because the membership is already set.
Has the chairperson already been appointed?
I'm assuming they've been working with someone.
The chair has been, but from memory,
Palmerston North Aerodrome, wasn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
No idea, haven't been to a meeting yet.
I think it's probably a matter that needs to be raised with Marsden District Council governance, as they're the ones that set the terms of reference, I imagine. Yeah.
Okay. Suggestion, Joe?
What's Uncle Bob's position on the aerodrome?
Uncle Bob, he's got a position on everything.
Well, that's what I meant when she talks about a conflict of interest. I agree with you, because he's on there and he's on the mountain. Has a big part of the council as well.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you declare a conflict of interest, because wherever small, it's a good thing. But
it actually states in here that it's accepted that there will be conflicts of interest because it's such a small region. I think if the chair has been appointed, so members are appointed by the chief executive of NDC with advice from the SAG chairperson, and the chairperson should be independent in recruiting of skills-based experience. One would assume that they're not going to go in and get a puppet, and they're actually going to get somebody who's going to have the best interests of the development. But I'm happy to raise that if you feel that
it's not an advisory group if everyone on there comes from a similar viewpoint.
And I don't believe they will do.
We need to make some progress on here. Are we happy to go with the recommendations as they are?
I suggest that if the council would like is change it, well, adding to recommendation 4, reference to writing a letter to Marsden District Council asking them to review those 2 particular provisions.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll make that now, and then Jane will read that out.
Given the drop down of money to support this project, I mean, I take it that it's a project that has coverage across the whole of the Wairarapa, so it's a collaborative approach. So all we're talking about the appointment of Councillor from today is that she represents our interest in that. That's what we're really talking about here. And so I presume they've got a representative from Wairarapa District Council.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I'd like to think that the influence is a shared influence and not just directed one from one source.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the recommendations. There's 4 of them there, with the 4th one being amended, and in 2 seconds, Jane will read the 4th one out.
Okay, so the 4th one will read, appoints to the Horo Advisory Group Councillor Cherry Campbell, Deputy Mayor Garnst as alternative, and requests the Mayor writes to the Marsden District Council asking that provisions in the terms of reference relating to the appointment of the Chair and the members to be reconsidered. What the Mayor might think of reconsideration.
Okay, so could I have a mover, please? Moved by Rebecca, seconded by Steve. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Carried, thank you. Then we'll move on to the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting. Jane.
This is just really a machinery, so we have to technically read who goes along and who has the votes on Carterton District Council's behalf. So this is what we do each year. the recommendation is that the mayor goes along and has the vote, and the deputy mayor also attends the meeting and has a vote if the mayor, for whatever reason, can't make it.
It says in the report what happens at the conference, but there's no conference this year, there's just an annual meeting. Any discussion? Yes?
So what's your program they're usually speaking at these AGMs or conferences?
Speaking?
Oh yeah, what's the format of the program that you attend these conferences or AGMs? What seems to be the overall purpose and what do you get out of it?
What do we get out of it? Well, this is an AGM. It's not our it's like any AGM, you're voting for positions, and there's also a whole lot of remits which are going to go forward and get voted on as well. And that gives local government New Zealand a steer of what their approach is towards central government. Jane, you've been in this space a lot longer.
Yeah, so yeah, no, that's pretty much it. There is an agenda that is now out, so if you'd like us, it's probably on the LGNZ website, but if you want a link to it, I could CVT it out. But they're pretty dry.
Yeah.
Pretty dry.
So are the remits pretty dry, or are they quite interesting that you speak to?
Pretty dry.
Like, are you doing your homework now? Or
No, as a council, we've discussed it.
Oh, yeah.
And we've made a call on all the remits, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll be representing the views of Carterton District.
Okay, cool, thank you.
So I'll flick you either copy of the agenda if you like, or link to it.
Yeah, it arrived on my desk yesterday.
Lots of remits.
Okay.
Lots of remits.
I haven't opened it yet.
So you're good to go.
Yeah, we did another government session.
Okay, so there's no further question, any discussion? No? Okay, so we'll move to the recommendations. There's 4 of them there, they're up on the screen. Have a move, please. Brian, seconder, Jill, all those in favour? Aye. Carried, thank you. We now go to the local government official information, the Meeting Act's requests. Pretty straightforward. Jane, do you want to talk to the report?
I haven't to answer any questions then.
Any questions? No, any discussion?
Just the first one. Is that all our written records from the council workshops? Because that seems to be a massive amount of information.
Yes, we got that one clarified, didn't we, and reduced down to agenda items. Because it would have been massive.
Who are voyagers?
Yeah, I wondered that too, actually.
The last one. Like code of conduct and things like that.
I did Google that.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't interesting.
Okay, cool. I misread it. I read it as spoilers. Just joking.
The information on the Terataki plain block, whereabouts is that?
What date?
15th of July. Lot 2, district plan, blah, 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 Terataki plain block X.
Oh, that's just a property. Most of our properties are Tarataki plain block. Okay.
That actually related to the Sparks Park development. Proposed development.
Thank you. It just makes a bit more sense when you put a name next to it about where it's settled. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, with these requests for information, you know, 21st of July. New Zealand taxpayer, requesting how much has the council paid for iwi engagement consultation or similar concept for each of the last 2 years. It's, I don't know what the response was though, but yeah, point interest.
Maybe quite good as long as in that space, not open. We'll get the New Zealand Taxpayers Union very well.
Oh, that's the union, sorry.
Oh, 2744944.
Yeah, I know.
The clarification.
Are they a restricted sort of group of people who request this sort of information?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
they
okay.
request every time.
And right around the country, so they will send out requests to every council. Those requests will go to every council, they won't be specific to us.
Yeah.
Are they complaints?
They're an advocacy group,
Okay.
keeping the government and local government honest.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that.
It's very generous.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, thank you. We'll go straight to the recommendations then. And that is that we receive the report. Can I have a mover, please? Robin, seconder. Steve, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried, thank you. So now we go to the elected representatives' accountability reports. We take them all as read. Is there any discussion? Okay, so we'll go straight to the recommendations. Which there's two. Taking up on the board there, can we have a mover, please? Yep, thank you, Jill. And a seconder. Brian, all those in favour? Aye. Carried, thank you. Now we go on to the Chief Executive's report, and Jane.
Yeah, happy to take the report this week, and managers are here to ask questions.
Okay, so open up for questions.
Ask Phoebe some really tricky
I was trying to find some really tricky ones for them.
Maybe we should come to the table.
That she'd stay another week to find the answers, yeah.
The one thing I will clarify on Dave's behalf is that we've changed the consenting table, so that was one thing that was brought up last time. There was a difference between the tables and the graphs with the consent numbers, and the reason for that is that is that in our consenting software, we report from two different areas. So we report from our financial model, and then we also report from our consenting system. And sometimes they pick up different numbers, like that if somebody, they just kind of add days. So that's why there wasn't consistency. So we've now changed the reporting so that it's consistent. Hopefully that makes things a little bit clearer. Yes.
Questions?
Really comprehensive report.
That's because we didn't read it. The upcoming events section is going to be subject to somewhat change.
Yes.
Is that saying?
Yeah, so what Carrie said this morning when we had a meeting to just talk through everything that's going on is that with the events, essentially it's the promoter who makes a decision about whether the event continues or not. So we're just waiting to hear back from the promoters about what the next steps are for those events. And then we push out that information.
And they're not likely to make a call until probably Friday when we have more information.
Yeah, I think it probably would be unwise for them to if they don't know what the outcome is going to be. So yeah, we'll just push that information out once we know. But cross fingers and yes.
Any discussion? No? Okay, we'll go straight to the recommendation. One recommendation that we received the report. Mover, please. Stefan, seconded by Brian. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. So now we have a resolution to